Hi, I'm Ashley with Campbell. Thanks for investing your time to help your community be a great place to live. Before you watch the video, make sure to click the subscribe button so that we can help you make educated decisions as a board member. My name is Ashley over at Campbell Property Management, and this is the HOA Access Control and Security Contracts webinar. For those of you not as familiar with Campbell, we have been in business since 1953, and we do currently manage over 450 community associations from Miami-Dade up now through Orlando and the surrounding area of Orlando. We love to bring educational events to you in the form of these webinars. You can always check out our upcoming and past events at campbellevents.org. And we also have our blog, Florida Association News, which can be accessed at readfan.org.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Beth Rappaport with Campbell Property Management. As Ashley mentioned, we've been in business since 1953. We work with over 450 communities in South Florida, many of them with gatehouses and complex amenities. And I am here today with Pat Hurley, who is a licensed security professional. And today's topic is residential security in Florida. A little bit about Pat Hurley. He is homegrown, born and raised in Fort Lauderdale. He's got a really interesting and amazing, impressive background. He's a former TV news anchor and radio talk show host in Miami, Fort Lauderdale. He's also a retired martial arts instructor, and he's been in the security industry almost 3 decades. He was mentored by the wonderful and late Sheriff of Broward County, Nick Navarro, and he's put together over 500 residential security programs for communities in the area. He has most of the security licenses one would need to be a success in this business. And very incredibly, he was appointed to the state of Florida's prestigious PERSAC Council in October of 2020 by Florida's Secretary of Agriculture. The PERSAC Council oversees and advises the Division of Licensing on all matters relating to security, private investigation, and recovery. He has been co-chair of the council since 2023 and has been reappointed to serve through October 2028. Thank you so much, Pat, for joining us, and welcome.
Beth, thank you. I am so grateful to be here. I'm going to need your help because I'm trying to figure out where my button is to press the share.
Oh, would you like me to? I can share instead, or it's at the bottom of the screen in the center. Sometimes it doesn't always display.
Huh. All right. Well,
Want me to? I can share.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and you go ahead and do it for me then? That would be delightful. Thank you. So anyway, first and foremost, my housekeeping item, thank you all so much for joining us. And I am so grateful to the great folks at Campbell Property Management for putting this together, because they realize, like so many of your peer communities and peer board of director members and committee members and property managers, that residential security is very, very important, and it is underappreciated. Not enough people are talking about it. And what we want to share with you today are some important nuggets of wisdom, some ideas to help you focus on the important stuff. Also tell you a little about the security officer industry, laws that govern, and so on and so forth. So hats off to the Campbell Property Management folks for putting this together. And now we're just going to jump right in. So not that it's going to be a shocker, but there are 2 kinds of security officers that are licensed by the state of Florida. They are unarmed, which is a D license, and an armed officer, which is a G license. Licenses related to the security investigation industry, there are many: the D, the G, the MB. We're not going to focus on all of them today. The ones that are important are the first 2 there: D, unarmed, and G, armed. There are training courses that the state of Florida mandates for both unarmed and armed officers. We'll talk about that in just a second. But D and G, those are the important 2 to remember. Security licenses, whether they're the unarmed or the armed variety, they are only good for 2 years. So you have to re-up every 2 years. And every time you do renew your license with Tallahassee, they go through the whole process of doing a very, very extensive background examination through the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. who taps into the FBI database. So they're doing a 50-state look at everyone who is applying for a security license or renewing a license. So they get to look at you really deeply every 2 years. The insurance requirements for security agencies. Well, this is something that I'm working on desperately with the PERSAC Council that Beth had mentioned a few minutes ago. This is that council that literally oversees the security industry, private investigation, and recovery industries. As the statute reads now, your average security officer provider only has to have $300,000 of liability insurance, which is totally inadequate in my humble opinion. I've got more on my car than the state of Florida requires that a security agency has. So it's something important for you to look at when you're examining and when you're judging and when you're evaluating security officer vendors. How well are they insured? Because you're going to find a lot of your mom and pops and small companies. This is a place where they can really cut a corner and save money, and hope you don't recognize it, hope you don't see it. But look, I recommend, personal opinion, you have to have a minimum of $1 million per occurrence. That's Pat Hurley speaking. That's not the law. That's not gospel. But that's something you really need to think about. How well are they insured? Here's another little thing that I hope I can change in Florida statutes before my tenure on the PERSAC Council is done, and that is security officer services are taxable. I wish they weren't. It's in a state where services are not generally taxable. We are, and there's only a handful of services that are taxable. Sadly, security officer services are one of them. And here's the other thing. They don't just say security officers are taxable or patrol vehicles are taxable. Everything that is on a security vendor invoice is taxable. Wish it weren't, but that's the way it is. Off to our next slide. All right, so we are governed by the Florida Department of Agriculture, the Division of Licensing, the DBPR, which is the Division of Business and Professional Regulation. That is who governs property managers in CAMs in the state of Florida. We're governed by the Florida Department of Agriculture and the Division of Licensing. They're headquartered in Tallahassee. John Raymaker's the division director. You can see all of the offices where we have our security licenses renewed, our applications sent into. Same places, by the way, if you're a concealed carry firearm holder, it's the same place you'd go to do your paperwork, same place we go for ours. I always like to recommend that anytime you're evaluating either agencies or security officers, go on the state websites and look at their licenses. The state will tell you if they're in good graces or they're not in good graces. If their license is under review, it's under suspension, it's some administrative action is being taken against them, or their license has been revoked or it was never granted. A very quick story. I just talked to a property manager a month ago in Orlando who says, we're using ABC Security Company. I said, I've never heard of them. I said, yeah, we've been using them for 2 years. I went on the state website and found out they're not a licensed security officer agency. So I immediately contacted Tallahassee and they got shut down lickety split. We don't want unlicensed activity, and we always want the help of consumers of security. If you get the hackles on the back of your neck up, or you think something's not right, look at these websites. If you want to check somebody individually, there is the website address for you to go search someone to see if their license is good. And to the right of that, you see the agency address. So if you think there's a company that maybe they're a little shady, I don't know about these folks, before you hire anybody, check to make sure they are in good graces with the state of Florida. And lastly, if there's a complaint, and we always welcome this because we want to make sure we're well policed by the state of Florida, we want you to go to this website you see at the very bottom. If you think you have a legitimate complaint against a security agency, please feel free to file it. They will follow up. They will investigate. If something is amiss, they will come down on somebody or an agency like a ton of bricks. So we hope you'll do that. Requirements of a security officer on duty. Well, you got to have your security license on your person. Doesn't matter that you are licensed. Can you hand an investigator your license while you're on duty? That's the key. If you can't, you are very open to fines, as is the agency who hired you, who's employing you. So if I go to work and I'm in your gatehouse or I'm in your lobby or I'm patrolling your community, and an investigator from the state of Florida comes and says, I need to see your license, and I don't have it. I said, well, I left it at home today. They don't care. You're getting fined, and the agency that employs you is also being fined. So they take that very seriously. The other thing they're looking for, a company issued ID on their person. They want to make sure that you not just licensed, but you can prove to anyone that you are. Uniforms, the state of Florida, the statutes, they tell us that we have to have very strict kinds of uniforms so that when we present ourselves to the public does not mistake us for law enforcement officers. So some of the things that we have to do is we have to put a patch, or we have to embroider our company patch with our name, our agency name, very clearly visible, either on the chest and or on the sleeves. But it's important that it has to be readable from conversational distance. So if I'm talking to a security officer and I'm in conversational distance, I have to be able to look at their uniform and identify by reading it exactly what agency has employed them. Again, another safeguard. The state wants to make sure that nobody is confused that who you're talking to is not a law enforcement officer, but is actually a security officer. Huge difference. So that's why the uniform standards are so important. As I mentioned a minute ago, investigators from the Division of Licensing do go out at night on weekends unannounced, and they do check to ensure compliance. And again, if a security officer is not in full compliance, they will fine them on the spot and fine the agency. Here's another, last but not least on this slide. One of the things you can never, ever do as a security officer is abandon post. That is against state statutes. Now, there is a little nuance here. Let's say somebody was scheduled to work from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. and at 3 p.m. they didn't get relieved. And they are calling their agency to say, look, I've got to go. I've got childcare. I've got an elderly parent I've got to take care of. I can't stay another 2 or 3 hours. And that person does not get relieved, but then leaves the post. That is not an abandonment. That would be viewed in the state of Florida's eyes as the fault of the agency. However, a security officer that is on duty from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. and doesn't like something that the property manager told the security officer to do, and the security officer says, well, that does it. I'm sick of this place. I'm getting out of here. Picks up their things and leaves before their shift is over. That is abandonment of post, and that will get a security officer not just have their license revoked, they will never get a license again. They are banished from the industry. So it's very important that security officers never, ever abandon their post. Limits of authority. I'm going to be very brief on this, but it's important that you understand a security officer is not a sworn law enforcement officer. They do have limits of authority. And if I had to encapsulate it, I would do it this way. A security officer licensed in the state of Florida, whether they're armed or unarmed, is to observe and to report. Those are the guardrails. Those are the parameters of what they can do. Observe and report. Now, that's much different than a sworn law enforcement officer who can investigate, place you under arrest, confine you, tackle you, put hands on you, and so forth. That's what they're trained and licensed to do. That is not what a security officer can do. I'm so happy that this got to be a part of the law about 20 years ago. Maybe it's 15 years ago, but something like that. Before this statute was added to the statutes, security officers were getting assaulted and beaten, and there was really not a lot of downside to it. But the state of Florida recognized we can't have security officers on duty getting beat up for doing their jobs. So they made this a third-degree felony if you assault or batter a security officer on duty. And believe me, there's been about 2 times in my 30 years of doing this that this statute came in handy. A security officer was attacked twice, I know of, and doing their job, simply doing their job and doing it well. But not everybody likes to be told no. Not everybody likes to be told, I'm sorry, you can't come in, or you're not expected. And that was the precursor to somebody being attacked. So this is a great teeth that the state finally put into the state statutes to prevent officers from being attacked. So now we're going to get into a little nitty gritty. The D-license course for unarmed security officers, it is a state mandated 40-hour course. You have to sit for about 5 days, either online, which is more popular these days. Used to be you had to go to a brick and mortar school to do it. You can do it either or now, but the online is much more popular. And at the end of that 40-hour course, you have to take a state mandated test and pass it. Once you pass it, now you fill out an application for your license. You put your certificate of graduation in it. You put your fee for your license in it, give it to Tallahassee, or go to one of their branch offices around the state. They're going to do a background check on you, as I mentioned earlier, and then you'll be issued your license if you're good to go. The G license is a companion license. That's the armed license. You can't become an armed officer, then become an unarmed officer. No, the pattern is unarmed is mandatory. That is primary. It is first. Only then, after you've achieved an unarmed license, can you go and achieve an armed license, but it requires more training. It's a 28-hour course on top of the unarmed 40-hour course. So it's two 10-hour days in a classroom, and then 8 hours on a firing range where they're making sure you've got the marksmanship and the pistol craft and whatnot to be able to be safe and sound and accurate with your weapon. So firearms qualification, you've got to do that every year. So even though your license for an armed officer is good for 2 years, every 12 months, you've got to go back to the firing range and you have to requalify. And then you have to send that paperwork into Tallahassee to say, I've requalified again. I'm good to go for another year. So that's absolutely imperative. Types of permissible firearms: semi-automatics or revolvers. Now, when I got into this industry 30 years ago, all they had was revolvers. But thank goodness the state of Florida finally came to their senses and allowed the modern semi-automatics to be used as sidearms. Now, there are some significant exceptions to that very hard rule. Secondary shotguns, automatic weapons are permitted, but only in very, very narrow circumstances. Those are government-related posts only. Critical infrastructure, I would point you toward nuclear power plants. That's where you would see our armed security officers being armed up with something beyond just a sidearm. You might see them with shotguns, you might see them with AR-15s, but that's by far the exception and certainly not the norm. The calibers of ammo that are allowed in the state of Florida, as I said, used to be only the .38 Special. That's the wheel gun or the revolver ammunition. Now we've got a whole host of them, from the small .380 caliber to the .38 Special to the 9mm, which is by far the most popular chambered weapon in the state of Florida and frankly around the world. Then you've got the .40 Smith & Wesson and the .45 ACP. So it goes from very small to a very large big bore caliber. Rules of engagement, deadly force parameters. I'll bet you didn't know this, but you as a firearm holder, as a citizen of the state of Florida, have the same deadly force authority as a licensed armed security officer does. Security officers don't have sworn law enforcement authority. They have the same authority that you and I do. They can only unholster the weapon, point and fire under very, very narrow circumstances. And those are, they have to be imminent threat of death or grave bodily injury. Those are the two parameters. You have to be a reasonable person would say that you are under immediate threat, not a threat tomorrow or next week, a threat right now that you are under for grave bodily injury or death. Under those two very limited circumstances, a security officer could draw and fire. But that's the same you've got. You and I, as citizens of Florida, have that same authority. The only thing that a security officer can do, an armed security officer can do, that you and I can't, is they can have their weapon in view. So they don't have to conceal their weapon. They can actually wear it openly on their hip. So that's the difference with that. Reporting a firearms discharge, one of the things we have to abide by, no matter what, even if it's an accidental discharge, state of Florida has to be told within 7 days of that discharge, or you're in trouble. Common issues with security officers and security officer firms. Low bill rates equal low pay rates. This is the accounting portion of our presentation today. This is so critical, and I can't emphasize this enough. When you are evaluating security officer firms, one of the most important things you've got to look at, and there are many things to look at, but this is one of the most important. What is the security officer firm telling you that they are going to pay the security officers? And then you've got to balance that with common sense and what you know of the marketplace to say, can we get quality people for $15 an hour in our marketplace who are going to be skilled and talented and devoted and attentive to their duty? 9.9 times out of 10, the answer would be no. You can't get a quality security officer making $15 an hour, but you have to look at that. You have to examine it. You have to force the security firm to share with you, what are you planning on paying these people? And then you've got to make a provincial decision whether that is a reasonable amount of money, and if your expectations are here, but they're planning on giving you something way down here. So Florida minimum wage law, get ready. It's about to hit $15 an hour about 1 year from now. And that minimum wage law has pushed wages up. It used to be very low. It's still low, but they've been pushing up gradually. So if you've got a security officer program where in 2025 or 2026 that is riddled with security officers making $14 or $15 or $15.50 an hour, chances are extremely good it is not a high-performing program or one that you can be real proud of. So the other things, cost and time required to become a licensed officer deter many from entering the industry. I mentioned earlier the training that you have to go through and the fees you have to pay for your training and pay for your license and so forth. That's a barrier to getting into the security industry. I can go down to Macy's department store today, fill out an application, and be working tomorrow. Not so with a security officer career. You've got all of those hoops you've got to jump through, and money and time that you have to put out in order to join this industry and stay in it. So you have to realize it is a barrier to overcome. I know this will be a shocker to you, but sleeping on overnight shifts is a problem with a lot of security officers. It's that darn thing called the circadian rhythm. It often kicks in around 11 p.m. till 7 a.m. It's very, very, very difficult. I don't condone it. Sleeping on duty, I never have, never will. But boy, I sure understand it on that overnight shift. It is tough to stay awake from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. It is. What a lot of your peer communities are doing these days, though, is on that overnight shift where you're only getting 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 transactions in an 8-hour period. They're replacing the security officer in the gatehouse with a remote guarding setup. This is where you have a remote guard kiosk installed at your gatehouse, and the transactions are handled off-site. So someone pulls up to the kiosk at 2 o'clock in the morning. They press the television screen. On comes a live security officer off-site who has tapped into your visitor management software in your gatehouse remotely. They're able to process that visitor or vendor or whoever it might be, and even raise the gate remotely. So that transaction is complete, just as if a security officer was in the gatehouse right then and there. However, the costs for doing this are substantially less than having the physical security officer in the gatehouse on that overnight shift. I have seen cases where communities have saved $30,000, $35,000, even $40,000 per year just on that third shift by switching it out from a live security officer to a remote guarding setup. Now, there's a little, some equipment you have to install. So there's a capital expenditure, but it's not much. It's not much. It's small. So the savings are real, and they happen year after year after year. So if you're really tired or you've had real trouble with sleeping on the overnight shift, this is a great alternative. And I really think you ought to investigate it. Certainly a lot of my clients are going that direction and have already gone that direction. No calls, no shows, quit without notice. That's the bugaboo of a lot of industries, but it certainly is for us. We do have that challenge, and it's tough. But the idea is your best companies have a bench of trained officers. They have flex officers. They have field supervisors who can jump in a moment's notice and take over if something goes sideways like that. Quality control. Something that me and a few peers pioneered about 25 years ago was placing a camera inside the gatehouse that records audio and video. And it is a very helpful tool. If you know you're being watched 24/7, or at least recorded 24/7, you're going to be more on your game as a security officer. It also helps solve mysteries about, what happened at 9:00 p.m. with this particular homeowner that barged into the gatehouse and started yelling crazy things. Well, it's all on camera. We don't have any mysteries. We can go back and look at the tape and do an instant replay. And so that's an important quality control tool that we use in my company to make sure security officers are in uniform, they're greeting guests properly, they're attentive, they're alert and awake, and doing their job well. Limited training. It's a toughie. Your smaller companies have a real struggle with this for sure, because they only make money when they're billing the client. Well, training off-site and whatnot is not a common thing to be billed to a client. So they try to push all the training while it's on your dime, while, kind of training in real time in your gatehouse. That's not the optimum way to do it. Your best companies will train off-site for your particular post orders, your particular standard operating procedures, and your needs before they ever arrive. So they hit the ground running. So you look for that. Look for a company that is doing that training and investing that money and that time to make sure that their program is a success. Industry turnover rate. We are, and I fully admit this, a very high turnover industry. Security officers are not high paid. When you get some of your lower paid industries, you get more turnover. I read an industry periodical about 10 years ago, and I don't think the numbers have changed at all. But about 10 years ago, this industry periodical did a survey of security companies across the United States, and they asked a simple question: what was their turnover rate annually? How many people did they turn over per year? Here's the answer 10 years ago. Your average security company was turning over 150% turnover per year. Astronomical, huge, breathtaking, which means there were some that were 300% turnover. So you're turning over your entire body of employees 1.5 times every 12 months. That is tough. Your best companies, your better companies, your companies with great culture that are paying the right wages, that are paying and giving benefits and doing things like that and have prestigious places to work, they're going to be much closer to the 30-40% range than they are up in that 150% range. So look for the companies that are paying well, benefits, great culture, great standards, and a lot of tenure in their officers. Undercapitalized. This is one thing you really need to look at, particularly with some smaller firms, that they are really running on a shoestring. I've had a lot of communities that have turned over to me, and I've taken over their program, and they've told me stories about trying a kind of a mom and pop, smaller kind of company, and realized after they launched, the owner of the company was in their office a week later with an invoice 1 week after they start, going, "Hey, can you process this today?" Well, how come they're doing that? Because they're having a rough time making payroll, and they're undercapitalized. So sometimes you won't know that until it happens. But again, looking for a financially stable security officer firm is always a good idea, and dig in as far as you can with that. Do ask for financials. I think it's an important thing to do. Beth, next slide, please. So I'm going to let you into the belly of the beast. This is really privileged information, but you are my close and personal friends, so I really feel comfortable sharing this with you. This is really the economics and pricing fundamentals of security officer firms. For a moment, we're just going to take an example bill rate of $27 an hour. That is what a security firm is charging you for an unarmed security officer to work in your community or your condominium. 65% of $27 an hour is $17.55. That would be the low end. The high end, 72% of $27 is $19.44 per hour pay rate. Those are the highs and the lows. The best companies are going to be somewhere in between there, like that 69, 70, maybe 71%. That's really the sweet spot for your best companies that are doing it right. They've got great management. They've got great backup. They've got great infrastructure. They've got great training. They have benefits. They're paying the right wages and so forth. Your best companies will not be at those two extremes, but will be closer to that 69, 70, 71%. And you need to ensure, whatever that bill rate is, that the pay rate that those security officers are getting is that number. 69, 70, 71% of whatever you are paying them per hour. You've got to ensure this. This is where quality starts, right here. I'm not going to spend a long time on this because this is really kind of a thing, sort of a thing in the past. When I got into the industry, there were tons and tons of in-house security programs. A lot of property management firms and a lot of property managers and boards of directors and committees have decided this is just way too big a headache, way too much liability. It's a really heavy lift. We'd rather contract this out than do it in-house. But there are still some in-house programs around, and I just share this with you very briefly. Take a peek. Some of your in-house positives, in-house negatives, contract security positives, and contract security negatives. Common practices and terms in a security agreement. Every security agreement you get into has got to have a 30-day cancellation clause with or without cause. You don't even have to have a reason. That is the standard in our industry. 30-day cancellation with or without cause. If somebody presents to you a service agreement, a contract that says something wildly different than that, you probably have the wrong security firm. This is the standard. No, you don't have to have a reason. You can have a reason, you don't have to, but 30-day notice to your provider. Contract is over, relationship's over, we owe you nothing else. And they walk away and you walk away. Payment terms, 30 days net. That is the most common terms. So look for that in your security agreement. Somebody that says, hey, I'm going to bill you every week and I need a check every week. You can agree to that if you want, but that is not an industry standard. The standard is net 30 days. Rate escalations built in. This is something that's important to me, and I really, really counsel my clients to do. We want to make sure that your security staff gets a raise every year. Everybody deserves a raise every year. Not saying that it's something exorbitant, but 3%, 4%, 5%, something they should get every year just to try to keep up with inflation, gas prices, getting to work and whatnot. So keeping them ahead of these kind of things is important. Putting that into your agreement so that you can budget on it year after year. And again, this is not meant to fatten the bottom line of the security provider. This is only for the purpose of increasing the pay of the assigned security officers at your site. That's it. And you have to make sure that they do it just that way. Always have an attorney review your contract. Never, ever try to play Perry Mason or try to do your own legal work. Always have an attorney review and look it over. Last, bundling security officer services and equipment. I highly, highly recommend you don't do it. There's about 2 or 3 outliers in my security officer industry that try to be everything to everyone. Oh, you need security officers? Yeah, we can do that. Oh, you need cameras? Yeah, we can do that. Oh, you want us to mow your lawn and paint your wall and redo your roof? Yeah, we can do it all and put it under contract. Well, that's nonsense. Those companies do almost nothing well. So they try to do everything. So they get their claws so deeply into you that you hesitate and sometimes walk away from canceling a company that is disappointing you and is really letting you down because you figure the headache's not worth it to do a divorce with these people. Their tentacles are so wrapped around us, we can't decouple ourselves from this vendor easily. So that's why they get all of these things in you. So my highest recommendation to you is if you need a company that provides visitor management software for your gatehouse, remote guard kiosks, cameras, fob systems, RFID systems, barcode systems for residence lanes, gate repair, you name it. Those are security integrators, and they are distinct and separate from security officer providers. So I can certainly recommend a lot of really good integrators to you if you are in need of that kind of service, but never get those kind of electronic technological things from me or companies like me. I'm a big believer in education, and these are two of the best places I get security education every year. On the technology side, they tell me what the new technologies are that's coming out, things that are beta testing, some of the latest toys and gadgets in the security and access control world. You find them at these two events, GSX at the As Is International Conference that happens every year. I believe this one is in New Orleans this year, and I believe it's in October for As Is. My favorite, however, is ISC West, International Security Conference West, that happens in Las Vegas every spring. Companies from around the world that have the newest cameras and access control and all kinds of technology. This is where they show their wares. And so if you don't mind committing a day in Las Vegas, I highly recommend it. You will be a walking encyclopedia of security technology when this conference is done. So go if you can. Challenges. Now we get into the real nitty gritty. Here's the challenges in residential security. I know you've never heard of this one before. Tailgating cars. Never heard of it before. I'm sure that never happens at your community. Well, I'm kidding. It is a big problem at a lot of communities, and it really happens on the resident lane. The resident lane or a back gate, a remote gate where it's not monitored. That's where you're going to find the vast majority of your tailgating happening. Is there any solution? There are a couple of solutions. You have to have a long enough runway of a driveway to make this work. So you've got to have, your infrastructure has to be right to make this work. But if you've got the driveway length and you've got the wherewithal to do this, I highly recommend car traps. Car traps are really, really great ways to stop tailgating. So if you have one gate right now in your in your residence lane, the idea of a car trap is to add one more gate arm. So now your gate number one opens and it allows a resident to go in, and then it closes. Now you've got the resident car trapped between gate one and gate two. Now gate two goes up, resident leaves the car trap, gate two goes down. Now gate one can go up again. So it's allowing one car in, one car out every cycle. That is your best way and most efficient way and cheapest way to really curtail tailgating. And if you can do it, I highly recommend it. Now, it's going to cost a little capital expenditure to add another gate on the residence lane, but it works. So give it some thought. Burglaries and car thefts. We've got a very advanced car theft gangs across the state of Florida. Many are in South Florida, but they are all over. And I'm going to share with you some of their modus operandi in just a second. But can you tell me when most residential burglaries take place? Do you know? Here's the answer. Between 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Monday through Friday. How come? Mom and dad are at work. The kids are at school. Nobody's home. Path of least resistance. Now, I'm not saying all home burglaries happen between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. I'm saying the majority of them do, because, thieves and burglars, they don't want to be caught. So they want to go when you aren't home and the kids aren't home and they think they can break in. How about car thefts? When do those mostly take place? Do you know? No, it's not during the daytime. It is overnights. So from about 11 p.m. to about 6 a.m., that's when you're going to find most of your car thefts are going on. How come? Everybody's home. All the cars are in the driveway. Everybody's asleep. Nobody's watching. It's dark. I can, sulk around a little bit and steal cars. So now, getting back to the car theft gangs, one of their modus operandi is some of the more sophisticated ones. They look for really upscale residential communities that have a porous perimeter. So look at your perimeter. If it is a porous perimeter, then you have the chance of people breaching it, whether that's over a berm, whether that is over a short wall or whatnot. So they'll get a car with about 4 people in it. 3 of them hop out. They go through that breach in your perimeter, that porous area in your perimeter, and then they spread out. And then they each take a street. This one goes over there, this one goes over there, and I'm going to go straight down this road. And they've got to work quickly. So what are they looking for at night as they're going down residential streets in your community? They are looking for cars with their side view mirrors out. That's the quickest way to know if a car is open or not. Closed, if they're tucked in, car's usually locked. I'm going to move on. But if the side mirrors are open or are out, that means the car is open. So they're going to try to look through that one. And what do these guys find when they're digging through these very upscale cars? They find jewelry, they find cash, they find laptops, they find all kinds of valuables, and often they will find the car keys sitting right in the cup. So often, once they've stuffed their pockets full of the jewelry and the cash and the laptops and everything else, what else do? They take the car, they drive it right out the exit. So you've got to get your residents to understand, just because you're a gated community doesn't mean you're immune to these car theft gangs. So you've got to have a very, very robust defense against them. I recommend you also, if you know you've got a porous perimeter, I highly recommend you get in touch with your local police department or your local sheriff's department, because each of those agencies almost always have a CPTED practitioner on board. CPTED is Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design, CPTED, Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. These practitioners are trained and certified to come out to your community, to look at your vulnerabilities, and to make really great recommendations on how those weaknesses can be turned into strengths and deter people from trespassing and deter the car theft gangs from getting in. So I urge you to do that. It costs nothing to call these CPTED practitioners at your local law enforcement agency and ask them to come out and take a look and do a survey and give you a report and give you recommendations. So put that on your to-do list. I really strongly recommend it. We talked about the value on the third shift, about remote guarding, so we won't go over that again. Trespassing, the pedestrians, the bicyclists, the motorcyclists. You know, one of the challenges is we have a lot of beautiful entry points, a lot of beautiful gated entry areas, but they don't have things that deter pedestrians, bicyclists, motorcyclists, moped folks from breezing right in and going around the gate arms and going around the barriers. So if you don't have pedestrian gates and infrastructure that can deter that, then you're likely to have, if not now, you'll have in the future, you'll have unwanted pedestrian, bicyclists, and motorcyclists getting into your community who you don't want. And remember, bad guys don't always drive cars. At least they don't drive them in. Sometimes they'll drive them out. So be thinking about that. Some infrastructure improvements that you can make, not just to your perimeter, but also to your gated entry area, to make it a little bit more difficult for pedestrians and bicyclists to get through. Short queues in visitors lane mean access control processes. They've got to be brief and efficient. Developers are notorious for putting gatehouses very close to the street that you just turned off of to get into the community. So sometimes you can have communities where the most cars you can have in a visitor's lane is 3. Well, that's going to mandate whatever your process is for processing visitors and vendors has to be very efficient, has to be very brief, has to be very quick. So you have to tailor whatever your process is to your infrastructure, because you can't have cars out in the highway or into the roadway, into the public way, or you're going to get the ire of the local police department. But there's ways around that. There's things that I could help you with too. Visitors with no valid ID, or they have an ID but not a driver's license. This has become an issue in the past, say 20-something years, where more and more community association attorneys and more boards are saying, and I think rightly, you can't come into our private community and drive on our private roads unless you can prove that you are licensed to drive an automobile. Now, I can come to a gatehouse with a passport. That's going to prove who I am definitively, but it doesn't prove that I'm allowed to drive a motor vehicle in the state of Florida. And that is why more and more and more communities are insisting that the only ID that is acceptable for visitors and vendors to enter your community is a valid driver's license. You know, there's people who have 5 DUIs out there who have had their privileges revoked, but they show up to your gated community on a Monday morning with a passport saying, "Let me in. I'm here to see Pat Hurley." Do you want to let him in? I wouldn't. So think about that. Speeding, rolling stops are always big trouble. There are some technology solutions to them. I recommend there's a company in the United States called Traffic Logics. You see the name right there. Logics is with an X. They make a lot of great products that deter speeding, that can fine speeders. They have traffic signs that light up that tell you your speed is, you know, X and you're going too far over the speed limit. There's a lot of things that they offer. So if you're encountering a lot of speeding and rolling stop issues in your community, I highly recommend you call Traffic Logics. They've got some great solutions. Abusive officers. We talked about having cameras in and around the gatehouse to stop that kind of abuse. But communities, I highly recommend, please don't allow anybody to abuse either your property managers or your security officer staff. And if they choose to do that, there's got to be some teeth, fining mechanisms, some other punishment that really deters them from beating people up who are simply following your instructions and trying to do right by you. Residents' lack of participation in the access control program, announcing guests prior to arrival. The best programs are the ones where your residents participate. They use the visitor management software. They announce their guests. It makes it for a very important, easy process for visitors to get into the community. You've got to insist upon it. You've got to drive that point home. Security officers in a gatehouse can't be sitting there taking phone calls all day long. They need to use that visitor management software to make it an efficient process. So think about that. Old technology, lack of technology hampers efficiency, processing guests. Again, the days of sticky notes and taking notes on notebook paper and logging guests in that way, folks, that went out with the penny postcard and the 8-track tape. Nobody does that anymore. You need a great visitor management software. Go ahead, Beth, we're running out of time, so we'll go to the next slide. Very quickly, these are all the reasons I think you need to look closely at a security officer firm, but I've highlighted 5 of them. These are the things you really should focus on when you're looking and evaluating security officer firms. How long have they been in the industry and in your marketplace? How many clients have they served for more than 3 years? Do they have clients with elevated expectations? Are they paying security officers above average rates? That's where you're going to get good people and lower turnover. I highly recommend you do your due diligence, do your homework, go visit prospective provider sites, be a secret shopper, check references. What not to focus on. Don't focus on where their other accounts are. That's the poorest way of figuring out who's a great security provider. Don't look at marketing materials. Don't listen to slick, persuasive sales representatives. I know that's very difficult in my case, but don't listen to, slick talking sales representatives, and don't base it on the desirable color of uniforms. These are not good reasons to hire a particular security officer firm. All right, so I've wrapped it up and I've done it in 50 minutes. That is a record for me, folks. I'm usually known for going 60, 70 minutes. So I am overjoyed to have spent this time with you. I've put about 10 pounds of groceries in a 5-pound bag. I am grateful to be here. I'm so happy that you stayed here this whole time. And I'm open to your questions. Let me also mention one last thing, though, before we start taking your questions. And here it is. One of the benefits to taking my seminar is I am always able to answer your questions, to tell you best practices, to give you some good advice. And that's no cost, no obligation. There's no gotchas. There's no anything. All you have to do is take my name and number down. I don't care if it's 5 years from now. And you say, Pat, I took your seminar with the wonderful people at Campbell Property Management back in 2025. And I loved your seminar and it was wonderful. And you're the greatest thing ever. but I got some advice I need, or I've got this security situation, or I don't know what to do. What's the law say? You call me and remind me that you took my seminar. I will help you till kingdom come. So that's my pledge to you and my thanks to you for sticking around and learning more about best practices in residential security. All right. So that having been the case, I am opening it up to your comments, your questions. I'll even take complaints.
Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We're going to get to as many questions as we can. So we've got our first question, Pat. It's a common one. Can a homeowners association require a photo ID for entry?
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. This is your private property. You make the rules, not the driver, not the visitor, not the vendor. Absolutely, you can ask for identification. Because if you're not expected and you are not authorized to come in, we are not coming in. And how do we know who you are? You have to present an ID to prove who you are. That is common practice. That is best practice. And there is nothing wrong with that at all.
And of course, you always want to check with your association attorney just to make sure that your governing documents allow for you to create rules and things that would support that initiative.
100%. I always recommend your post orders, which are your standard operating procedures, the way you want things done. Run that up the flagpole. Make sure that what you're requesting is within the parameters of the law and won't get you in any trouble.
Very good. And what are your thoughts about requesting the ID of everybody in a vehicle?
Yeah, it's not common, because if you want to talk about choking up an entry point to a point where you're at a standstill, nobody can get in. IDing everybody in the car is frankly not common practice at all. I'm not going to say it never happens. There are a handful of communities that are so diligent and so deeply serious about access control that they do. For instance, you'll get a landscape truck with 15 guys on board, and you're only identifying the person who's driving. There are a few communities that want to see IDs for every single person on that landscape truck. I'm going to tell you, it is not common practice. It is a heavy lift. It will cause problems. But if that's what you want done and you understand the downsides, and there are downsides, then you certainly should run that up the flagpole to your association attorney. Make sure it's good to go. But whatever you want done, your security officer provider will execute.
Thank you. And what about for communities surrounded by a perimeter wall, but have streets and sidewalks that are open in public? What are your thoughts on using a private rover versus relying on the local police?
Well, listen, I always love using the police, but they do cost a lot of money. You can't generally tell them what to do. You can't give them specific tasks to do, generally speaking. And they cost a lot of, they are quite pricey. I think I was just talking to a community the other day that has off-duty PD, and they're paying $80, $90, $100 an hour. So that's a lot of dough. You can get twice the bang for the buck if you have a licensed security officer doing patrols. So I'm a believer in a mix, depending on the situation you've got, what kind of issues you're dealing with. Sometimes a police officer is good. If you've got, for instance, big time speeders and they're blowing through, off-duty cops could run radar and give tickets and pull cars over right there and fine them. So, but generally speaking, even if it's a public sidewalk or public place, again, the security officers are there to observe and report. And they can summon the police if necessary, if there's a situation, but you're saving a lot of money if you're doing it with security officers.
Okay. And what about an entrance gatehouse that doesn't actually have gates? So stopping is something that they ask people to do, but it's not always happening.
So help me understand. You've got a gate entry or a gatehouse area, but there are no barrier arms to stop the traffic from coming in?
Correct.
Then here's what you've got. You've got access, but you do not have access control. It's a free-for-all. You're asking for voluntary cooperation is all you're asking for. And you know what that's like. You're not going to get a whole lot of it. So unless and until you decide or are able to put in some kind of barrier arm that forces traffic to stop and be identified and so forth and be vetted, then you're going to have a freeway there. You're not going to have any kind of access control, and I really wouldn't expect any.
Okay. And are communities required to have signage that states that they are recording the activities in the gatehouse area?
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Particularly if it's audio. If there's an audio component, we're a two-way state. Florida's a two-way state. So if you're recording audio and video, you have to have signage in and around that area that shows people and clearly designates this area is being recorded audio and video. Now, talk to your association attorney about the exact verbiage that he or she prefers to have, but that signage has to be there if you're recording audio and video in and around the gatehouse.
Okay. And what are your thoughts on security companies staffing the gatehouse with 1099 employees instead of direct company employees?
I don't believe in it. I think obviously there's a reason they're doing it. I think they're trying to avoid the costs of hiring employees and doing right by them and getting them benefits and vacations and 401k and health insurance and whatever. And I think the way that you do that is make them 1099 employees. And that's not a good thing. You're not going to get people there who are going to plant their flag and are going to serve you long term when you have people that have 1 foot in and 1 foot out the door. I don't think that's the way to do business. I don't think that's the way to treat hardworking security officers. And personal opinion, this isn't the law. This is Pat Hurley talking. I highly advise against it.
Okay, thank you. And how do you monitor security personnel that are roving around the community on a golf cart and park themselves under a shady palm tree or in a dead end and take an extra long time to do their patrol around the community?
Yeah, that's one of the challenges of the industry, frankly, is the patrol element to making sure that they are constantly on the go and they're not, again, parking for extended periods of time. If you've got a good patrol management software, now we use one that's called TrackTick. TrackTick is connected to the satellites. So we're able to see where and when the security officer is being mobile or if they're not being mobile. So that's an important element that helps us to understand, is this officer mobile? Are they hitting their touch points throughout the community? Because, the idea is to put these TrackTick touch points throughout important points of the community that the security officer must go to within a given time. And that creates a report, a patrol report that is then automatically sent to the property manager. But it also gives us the ability, because the satellites are connected to the TrackTick software, which is loaded into a common cell phone, it allows us to see, were they patrolling? Were they mobile? Did they have an extended stop in a place for an extended period of time? What was the reason for that? It's a great investigative tool. It's a great quality control tool. And if you don't have your patrol officers who are equipped with that kind of patrol management software, then they ought to be. And if they're not, I think it's a mistake.
Okay, and what are your thoughts on license plate readers, both entering and exiting the community?
I absolutely 100% insist you do it. I think it is a absolutely imperative key to access control. It's not enough to have an LPR, which is a license plate recognition camera. That is an AI camera. It's a smart camera. It's an analytical camera. They can actually read the alphanumerics of a tag and then upload that into the software as somebody is being processed. It's not enough to know this car was being driven by Pat Hurley with this tag number heading to this destination within the community at this time. It's also important to know, when did Pat Hurley leave your community? That's why an LPR camera on the exit that is also tied into your visitor management software closes the loop. It prevents mysteries. Now you know who came, where they were going, what they were driving, and you know exactly the time that they left.
Thank you so much. And I think that's all we've got time for today. We are right at 1 o'clock.
Thanks for watching. For more great educational content, Click the subscribe button now.